Hi everyone. Today I want to talk about what I take to be the radical implications of so-called desert-based theories of justice, or theories of justice that think that benefits and burdens ought to be allocated in a society according to how much different individuals deserve those burdens or benefits. So such theories of justice are readily and maybe naturally viewed as conservative. Uh, However, I'm going to make the argument that if we accept the principles of desert-based theories, we should instead favor a radical redistribution of burdens and benefits, particularly when it comes to distribution of wealth. So I'm going to argue that if standard accounts of desert-based justice are correct, then we should pursue radical changes in our society. This is because actual human societies come nowhere close to allocating benefits and burdens according to desert. In order to achieve that, drastic changes to our social and economic systems would have to be made. Because of that, and contrary, I think, to a common view, desert-based theories of justice are radical and arguably more so than egalitarian theories. So although most desert-based theorists don't think that the world perfectly corresponds to the demands of their theories, such theories are naturally viewed as relatively friendly to the status quo. This is certainly true in society at large. The idea that one has worked hard and deserves the benefits they enjoy, unlike the others, say the poor, homeless, immigrants, etc., is often paired with opposition to social and economic programs that might redistribute benefits in some way. This is especially obvious in certain political appeals. So maybe for these reasons, desert-based approaches to justice might be viewed as conservative, maybe even reactionary. Broadly speaking, desert-based theories can be divided into contribution-based theories and effort-based theories. So roughly speaking, these varieties specify that one's desert is determined either by one's contribution or by one's effort. Contribution-based views hold that someone's deserved share of benefits depend upon the value of that party's contribution to some specified social good, with higher value contributors deserving a greater share compared to their lower value counterparts. Effort-based views hold that a party's deserved share of benefits should depend upon the effort that that party exerts in reference to some specified end, with harder workers deserving comparatively greater benefits than their less hard-working counterparts. So of course, a full theory is going to contain a lot more detail than just that and go into a lot of other specific issues, but that gives you a general idea of the two main types of desert-based theories of justice: contribution-based and effort-based. So if we look at the actual world, it seems pretty clear that burdens and benefits are not distributed according to desert on either of the two varieties just mentioned. So I think few would deny this seriously, although there might be a lot of disagreement regarding what desert requires in place of the actual distributions. So relying on the idea that desert is based on either the value of one's contribution or the degree of one's effort. Some examples might illustrate this. So CEOs in the United States generally receive much greater compensation than their counterparts in other countries. You might ask, well, do US CEOs make a vastly greater contribution or effort than CEOs in other countries? That seems doubtful, right? It's not clear why that would be the case. Another thing to notice is maybe what we saw during the COVID-19 pandemic. So the distinction between essential and non-essential workers was informative. The so-called essential workers included grocery store employees, delivery drivers, healthcare workers. So with few exceptions, highly paid doctors, for example, these essential workers receive typically very low levels of compensation, often just minimum wage. Conversely, jobs that were considered to be inessential often command much higher salaries and benefit packages. Yet society was able to survive for an extended period of time with greatly reduced contributions from highly paid professional workers. It would not have been able to survive, I would say, with a similar reduction from essential poorly paid workers. So I think that gives a pretty clear indication of the relative value of the contributions. Unsurprisingly, essential workers, called essential work after all, are of greater value than inessential workers. But the levels of remuneration don't come close to reflecting that, right? So what should the world look like instead of what we actually have? So I would say the most radical provision of a desert-based theory of justice would concern the redistribution of wealth. So many rich individuals owe their wealth simply to good fortune, right? Say having rich parents. It's fairly obvious that one does not deserve wealth that you simply inherit, right? So you haven't done anything besides being born. So suppose I receive a gift of $1 billion with no strings attached. I don't deserve the money, right? If I did deserve it, say because I made a highly valuable contribution to the social good, then that money would count as some type of compensation, a reward, and it wouldn't be a gift. Simply by definition, gifts aren't deserved. Inherited wealth seems to count as a gift, and hence is undeserved, because it's received simply in virtue of one's parents having been wealthy, something in which the recipient typically plays no part. Right? I don't deserve my parents' wealth. So let's ask the question, is it unjust if I receive undeserved wealth via inheritance? If we're really committed to a purely desert-based theory of distributive justice, then we should answer yes. A theory of distributive justice is meant to specify how burdens and benefits ought to be distributed across parties within a society. This requires some criterion of determining proper distributions, and desert is one plausible and prominent candidate for that. So on such a view, burdens and benefits ought to be distributed in accordance with whether, and perhaps to what degree, parties deserve those burdens and benefits. If I receive a benefit that I don't deserve, then we have a case in which burdens and benefits are not distributed in accordance with desert, and thus we have a violation of the requirement of desert-based justice. There are many objections that you might raise to this. So for example, you might say that although recipients don't deserve their inherited wealth, they are nonetheless entitled to it for some other reason. Perhaps everyone has a right to transfer their wealth to another party if they wish to do so, at which point the receiving party becomes entitled to that wealth. Inheritance would just be one way of making such a transference. So one might say that undeserved wealth can be justly possessed in such cases. Perhaps that's true, but it requires appealing to non-desert-based considerations, say property rights. So you might say the parents have a right to their wealth, they can do what they want with it. Maybe that's true, but that has nothing to do with whether or not the person getting it deserves it. And if we're working from a desert-based theory of justice, which is the assumption, right, in this experiment, then bringing in other stuff won't really help. Right, to say, well, maybe they don't deserve it, but there's some other reason that it's okay for them to have this wealth. Yeah, of course that's possible. But if whether you deserve it is going to be the core consideration of our theory of justice, if we're going to run with that, then these other facts just wouldn't matter from a justice perspective. But it wouldn't be the case that they deserve it, and therefore it's not just that they have it. If you're going to bring in other considerations like property rights, the right of parents to do with their wealth as they wish, that's not a desert-based theory of justice, it's something else, which may well turn out to be correct, right? I'm not arguing against that here, just trying to play out the implications of if we adopt a purely desert-based theory of justice, what happens? So there's a lot more that could be said about this, other objections that could be considered, of course, but I just wanted to motivate this general idea that although we often think of appeals to whether or not someone deserves something as being relatively conservative and friendly to tradition and the status quo, I actually think that if we took desert-based theories of justice seriously, we would have to radically change our society. It would be a much, much different place. Okay, thanks for listening, and if you have any thoughts about it, please let me know, and I'll talk to you next time. Thank you.